Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another tropical update here by Adrian Forecast. As you guys can tell, this is going to be a very exciting video. This is going to be my final hurricane forecast for the Atlantic for hurricane season 2020. Hope you guys all are excited for this update here. I have very new information. I also, at the end of the video, I put my own predictions and I made my new maps so you guys get all the new data. So if you guys want to know about what this hurricane season can bring, whether you can see a landfall or all the way to how many storms we can see, please watch the whole video. So this is going to be very exciting. I will be tracking the tropics all summer. So be sure, if you're new, subscribe, especially if you want to have as many tropical updates and as many new data updates as well. Of course, also be sure to share the video or channel to anybody that you know wants to be aware of this hurricane season and what it can bring for millions, whether it's the Caribbean, whether it's Central America, or whether it's the United States. But without further ado, let's get this tropical update. So let's go ahead and check out the NOAA outlook here, or the NOAA outlook here. This is a new. I think it came out exactly a week ago, I think. So I believe it came out a week ago, last Thursday. So this is the new 2020 Atlantic hurricane season outlook for NOAA. And as you see, they have a 60% chance for above normal activity, or it's going to be above it's going to be a lot more active. So they have a lot of confidence in actually having this season to be above normal based on activity, storms, majors, and all of that. Also, they have a 30% chance for near normal. So as you see, even the second highest probability is near normal, which is still a pretty good season. And then they have a 10% chance for below normal season, which is absolutely crazy how confident they are. They are super confident, and it's 90% of that 100% is near normal or above normal. So they are very confident, and this is not looking like a good season. Even NOAA predicts that as well. As you see, they do predict 13 to 19 named storms, which I think is a bit on the lower side, but I guess they don't want to overstep and make the season look a lot more active, I guess, or they don't want to. I guess they're gonna wait to get a lot closer to the season when they start updating it. So I think that's a bit on the lower side, in my opinion, but I think they don't want to overstep it. They want to stay on the doable. But I think 13-19, that's what they predict NOAA. And they also predict 6 to 10 hurricanes, which I also think is a bit on the lower side. And then major hurricanes, I do agree with 3 to 6 hurricanes, but it doesn't matter if I do agree or not. It doesn't matter if I disagree or agree. This is what NOAA predicts, and it's reasonable. It's really reasonable. And they have stepped up their numbers since the last NOAA update there. Last thing we're going to be, not the last thing we're going to be looking at here really quickly is the tropical weather outlook. Here we have the post tropical, the remnants of Bertha. Here it is over West Virginia now. It's still bringing extremely heavy rain. And it actually hasn't weakened too much. It's at 1,012 millibars, and it didn't get below 1,009. So the thing, central pressure-wise, hasn't changed a bit, but we still have 25 miles per hour as maximum sustained wind, so it is technically really weak. And then it is actually moving north at 28 miles per hour, so this thing's moving very fast. So we're still going to be seeing flooding threats, but not going to be seeing flash flood warnings yet, because this thing's moving awfully fast, so it can be out of the way very fast. Also, we have a potential system out here into the eastern Pacific right here. It has an 80% chance for development in the next 5 days, and it has a 40% chance in the next 2 days. So this thing actually, I know it's really far away, this thing could actually very well be a hurricane or a tropical storm based on the models all the models are agreeing on this, but of course it's too far to say. But we do have a potential development here for a tropical storm or hurricane within the next 5 days, and the thing could be an invest very soon as well. So be sure this is things very well likely could become a pretty big system here for the Mexico areas or Central America. So we're gonna keep an eye on this though. But we're gonna be focusing first on the SSTs, and we actually now have a La Niña like pattern here, and we actually do have a La Niña. We have reached a La Niña numbers here. So technically we do have a La Niña. As you see, we have these cooler waters now off the coast of South America and across the central Pacific, which is exactly what you need for a La Nina. If we do have if we have these waters cooling down a lot more off the coast of South America, we possibly could have a strong La Nina. But as you see, these SSCs look very different compared to a month ago. This thing got to a La Nina very, very fast. We still have to wait a couple weeks to stay at these SSTs to officially name it a La Nina as our pattern. But as you see, this is a La Nina pattern. Obviously, La Ninas do bring less, on average, La Ninas bring in more active hurricane season for the Atlantic and less active for the Pacific, because obviously that's cooler waters. But for the Atlantic, this brings La Ninas brings less wind shear and warmer SSTs, which is favorable, and it also brings in less winds higher in the atmosphere. Of course, that's wind shear as well. So the less wind shear, obviously, the better the probability storms can develop or strengthen. Here we have very favorable conditions across the Caribbean and Northern Atlantic. Here we do have very warm SSTs, and we'll continue to see that warm up. And so as you see, this like this just because this La Nina, this is bringing a very favorable season. But even with the La Nina this year, it's still looking it's still looking a lot more active than usual La Ninas or a usual hurricane season on La Ninas. This seems to be more active generally not only when it's El Nino or neutral, but also La Nina. This is how active the season can be. Very favorable conditions across much of the tropical and northern Atlantic there. So we have technically reached that La Nina status. And as we look here, I'm going to show you here, we have reached negative 0.568, which means it has reached a very weak La Nina right here. As you see, not too far ago, May 14th, this thing was at around negative 0.2, which it made a huge jump from now. At May 28th, it is at almost negative 0.6. And if it gets lower and lower, this thing will be a very strong La Nina, and that can produce a better chance for maybe NOAA will increase their numbers once it stays at La Nina for a while. This thing just decreased really quickly. Like, this thing was a really fast transition into La Nina. That was really fast. Like, it dropped extremely fast, and many people thought, oh, we won't have La Nina conditions until July or August, but they kind of said that a little bit too far off. I think we definitely have La Nina conditions for June. Well, obviously we can't. Obviously, just because we got to La Nina doesn't mean we have the conditions for both oceans. But by mid-June, end of June, we will have very favorable conditions for much of the northern Atlantic. So this thing has reached that La Nina status here. This line is the La Nina status, and it has reached below that. So technically, we have reached a La Nina for the Niña 3.4 index, but we can't officially make it official until it stays at that status for a while. Because just because it's been there for 2 days doesn't mean we can call it already a La Nina. We have to wait either a week or two it has to stay at that La Nina condition to officially make it a La Nina. As we look at the SAL, or the Saharan Air Layer, or Saharan dust, basically, people don't know we have the Saharan desert across much of northern Africa. And we have a lot of strong trade winds here that come in and push off that sand from the desert. And these westerly winds these easterly winds do push that sand up in the atmosphere and air, and it pushes it out into the ocean. This is exactly what that Saharan air layer is. It's that warm area aloft, or that dry area aloft there, what we're seeing. And you can definitely see we are definitely seeing a decent amount of Saharan dust. And what Saharan air layer does to the ocean, or what it does to hurricane forecasts or hurricane probabilities, it dries out the atmosphere because it's dust. And for those people who know, hurricanes need a moist atmosphere to develop. Really, if you have a lot of Saharan air layer dust, it will be very unfavorable for something to develop here, especially off the coast of West Africa. We're gonna have Saharan air layer dust to stretch all the way into the Gulf of Mexico, but usually we see the most of it off the coast of Africa. And as you see, this is actually This map is showing very favorable conditions for development within, like right now, we have very favorable conditions based on the Saharan air layer for systems to develop. Obviously, we have to also have warm SSTs for something to be favorable. Just because we have very little SAL doesn't mean, oh, we can have something develop within the next couple of days. But we also have to have, of course, a wind shear has to be lower. And obviously, the lower the wind shear, the lower the SAL. And also, we have to have warm SSTs. So if we have very little SAL, but cool SSTs, really cool waters, it'll be a wild card for something to develop. And as you guys see, it looks like we have a lot of SAL right now, but actually we have very little SAL. We actually have low to mid level for the amount of Saharan air layer dust we have. Really, we last year at this point we actually had pinks and purples, which means extreme dust, extreme amounts of SAL air mass. But this year we have very little dry air, very little dust, which is actually showing you how favorable these conditions will be. So as of right now, we have very favorable conditions based on the SAL, but obviously this SAL will change and we can possibly increase. But as of right now, we are seeing very little Saharan air layer compared to last year, which means obviously this point could be more favorable. But as we look into the future for the SAL, we do have a bit more SAL getting out to the ocean. As you see, we had this dust going all the way to the Caribbean. But look at this. It's actually very little amounts of this SAL. You see very little. And it's going to be stretching as we continue to get closer to the official hurricane day to the official start. We'll have a lot more dust to become a bit more widespread. We don't really have that much dust across the Caribbean or across the tropical Atlantic until June or May. And as we get closer into June 1st, this is actually May 30th, we're going to have a lot more dust coming up. These trade winds will strengthen, and we're going to have a lot more SAL across the tropical Atlantic. Just because we have SAL in the atmosphere doesn't mean, oh, we can't have anything to develop. Because look how the lighter the brown, obviously the less the dust there is. And as you see, very light colored browns, which means this is actually not too much SAL. We're going to have SAL in the atmosphere. You're not just going to have no dust across in one area. There's going to be dust. But obviously the more the dust, the less the favorable conditions are. But what I noticed is the amount of dust is actually going to be increasing for off the coast of Africa. We're going to be seeing a lot of dust coming off the coast of Africa, which means it could be a lot less favorable for the coast of Africa to have to develop. But we could have favorable conditions for this area because we have very little dust. So that could mean, oh, maybe for a week or two this will be unfavorable. But once the SAL goes down or dies down, then we'll have favorable conditions. But also we have this whole general area where we have systems to develop and then move towards the move towards the west. So maybe within a couple of days we might see some pinkish colors for SAL because it does seem these winds will strengthen or increase towards the west and will increase that that Saharan air dust. And the last thing we'll be looking at before we look at my maps is the the precipitation anomaly here, which anomaly means it changes a lot. So this is not going to be official for the whole season. But obviously, the more the precipitation, the more the favorable it is for tropical systems to develop. So basically, you want to see greens from this light green all the way to the purple. This is favorable. This is favorable for hurricanes, favorable for tropical systems. So if you want to have tropical systems, you want to see above this. If you have anything in the yellowish color to the pink or dark red or hot pink, very unfavorable for this tropical development. As you see for June, very favorable conditions for the Western Caribbean for tropical development. Really, you split this up. This is the Western Caribbean. This is Eastern Caribbean. And as you see, the Western Caribbean, which I've been saying since March or April, I've been saying since at least April that the Western Caribbean is going to be very active for June. And as you see, with the anomaly, it all matches up here. We're going to be seeing extremely above average precipitation. And I know it's very far away. We might have a tropical system in the Western Atlantic by next week that develops in the exact area where we have this above precipitation. So really, we have very favorable conditions for the Caribbean this June. Really, the most favorable conditions in the whole Atlantic. We also have a little bit favorable conditions for parts of the tropical Atlantic, but really, we're gonna have some drier conditions there. Just because we have drier conditions in general area doesn't exactly mean we're not gonna have anything to develop. It just means it's just a little bit less unfavorable. As you see, look, for example, this pink or this yellow is only it's only like right here, which means, I mean, it's not even that bad. So just because we don't have a green doesn't mean it's not favorable. It's just a little bit less unfavorable, or it's just saying that there's less precipitation than the general area for this month. But it doesn't mean we're gonna have something develop here and then it's gonna die out right here. I mean, that doesn't make exactly, that's not how it works. It just means maybe it's not as favorable, or it's just saying there's not going to be as much precipitation in that general area. But just on general, very favorable conditions for the Western Caribbean. As we get into July kind of also has very favorable conditions for parts of, now really the most favorable condition will be off the coast of South America. So who knows if this SAL dies down, we can have a system to develop off the coast of West Africa and then take in throughout the Caribbean there. Who knows? That can very well happen. But just because we have some yellows here doesn't mean we can have a single thing to develop there. It just means it's not as favorable, but we can definitely have things to develop in this general area. And of course, it's an anomaly. It's going to change. As we now look at August, August is my main month of focus, and you guys can tell why. Look at August. Look at this whole area. This whole area that's going to be seeing above average precipitation. This whole area. That's a lot of the Atlantic, and as you see, it includes the most active part of the Atlantic, the Caribbean and the coast of the U.S. Also, look at this. Very, very favorable conditions for the off the coast, for the tropical in between South America and Africa. Very favorable conditions. And look, who knows? Doesn't mean it's going to take this track, but we can have a huge area of development right here. A potential for, this is going to be X for this point. We can have anything at this point. We're going to have multiple systems for August that can develop and head towards the Caribbean and U.S. Obviously, all the months for the hurricane season are a focus, but August is my main month of focus. It's right there. I really focus on that because it could definitely be a big month of major hurricanes for the Caribbean, the U.S. I mean, I think we might have, I can't exactly say this with certainty, but I think we can maybe have our most landfalls in August. As we look into September is also looking very favorable. As you see, a lot of the tropical Atlantic is above average precipitation, and almost the whole Caribbean and the Gulf Coast is including above average precipitation, as well as the eastern coast. October is also looking a lot more favorable compared to average, but it's more favorable now for the Gulf Coast and the Caribbean. Really, it wouldn't be as favorable at this point. We don't really have a system developing much of the tropical Atlantic in October. More like the Caribbean, the Gulf Coast, or the eastern or the western Atlantic. And then in November, the conditions are kind of dying down as we get closer into the winter, but we are still going to be seeing some favorable conditions likely for the Caribbean as well. And look, even the Gulf Coast and the eastern coast, this whole area, they may see some very small areas of below average precipitation, but I mean, that's not that much. Like, it's not even that far from average conditions. So let me just say this general, for this whole video, what you got in this is it could be very active, and we have a lot of months that can definitely bring in name storms and a lot of activity. So guys, now getting to my maps, and this is my first map out of my 2 maps, and I also have my predictions for the whole season. So this is what I made yesterday, and also David Schlotthauer said it was very accurate. He said, I was on a Discord with him. Many other people agree with this. I wanted to make sure it was as accurate. I actually made this before I showed them, but David also said this is very accurate as well as other people. So I also feel very confident in this map. I do apologize if it's not the best quality, because the map server, or the thing I use for my monthly maps or my seasonal maps, I cannot use this I don't have an ocean option, so I don't have that good quality, so I have to use what I can use. But let's go ahead and start off with this. So let's go ahead and start off with the yellow color. That says close call, landfall, or some tropical activity. That's going to be for much of the eastern coast, as you can see, maybe all the way up to Nova Scotia. Really, we can call that either the wild card, because with the wild card, we can either have no landfalls in that area, close calls, or some decent tropical activity. For example, we can either have a system to develop right here. We can have a system to develop right here. It can either go straight up into the Atlantic coast. It can make a super close landfall, a super, like, up the coast like that. Or we're going to have, like, something that just goes like that. Like, again, this is a cone for a reason. It doesn't mean it's going to be, it doesn't, just because the cone is for the land doesn't mean, oh, it's going to hit land. There's a, like, for cones, for forecasts, a cone means it can generally go in this general area. So this whole area is where we can have these systems develop. So as you see, maybe we have systems in this part of the cone. So just, even if we have no close calls, but we have them over here, technically this map was a little bit accurate, as you see, like that. We can have systems going like that. Really, we can call that the wild card. We can have close call landfall. We can have a tropical landfall, whether it's a tropical storm or hurricane, or some just decent tropical activity in this whole cone area. Now for the red. This is my most activity and many landfalls. So this is going to be including parts of the Carolinas, parts of the southeastern coast and the eastern Caribbean, and part of the eastern Gulf Coast. So this is where I think we'd have the most potential for landfalls, most of the tracks. I think that most of the storms that come to the general area, the vicinity of the eastern Atlantic, I think they all go in this red, or not all of them, most of them will go in this red area. That'll be including the eastern Caribbean, the Bahamas, including Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, maybe the tip of North Carolina, and the Gulf Coast, including Alabama and the Big Bend of Florida. So I think we have many potentials for systems to go here, whether it's going here, or even here. Like anything can go in the general area. And then for this other color, this orange, that's some activity in hurricanes. So it could be the second most active region, in my opinion. Out of the three region, or the three cones, I think the orange one will be the second most active, behind the red. And this could very well be mostly for June, actually. Doesn't mean exactly we're going to have systems that go this way. Maybe we'd have systems that develop right here and then go this way. So just because this cone goes this way, doesn't mean that there can't be systems that develop over here or over here and then go this way. So this whole cone right here is where I have area focus. Same thing here. We can have something to develop here and then go way there, or something to develop here and then go like that. So as you see, it's just this cone is where we have an area of potential for some big systems that can either affect parts of the Western Caribbean or the Gulf Coast, including Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. So you guys are definitely want to watch out there. Now for the wind shear map here, my wind shear map. This is my below average shear. So this dark green or this general green, we're gonna have below average shear. So obviously the less the shear, the more favorable it is in that condition, the area. So that's gonna be for much of the northern Atlantic there, the tropical Atlantic as well, and part of the Caribbean and eastern Gulf. So if you're like on the coast of this green, or if you're in the Caribbean and you're on this green, you're definitely going to have favorable conditions based on the little shear. And then up the coast of the Atlantic and part of the eastern Atlantic right here, for this area, we're going to be seeing slightly below average shear. So we're going to be seeing some below average shear, but not as much. Like it's going to be close to average, really. Now for my forecast for the 2020 here, let's go ahead and check that out. So this is my hurricane season forecast. I did not do this in my last tropical update here, or my last hurricane forecast, but this is it. This is my own predictions, nobody else's. Somebody's may be close, but this is my predictions based on what we just saw. All the tabs I showed you in this video, this is all helping me make my prediction. Total named storms this whole season, 17 to 22 is my prediction. That may seem very high compared to the NOAA, but many people are saying 17 to 24, 17 to 20, 18 to 21. I think 17 to 22 is very, very reasonable, in my opinion, based on the little shear, little SAL. warm SSTs, just everything comes in play for this. Hurricanes, and not only that, we've already had 2 named storms, and it hasn't even reached June. So that's already 2 named storms. So technically, the 17 and 22 is for the whole general season, and we've already had 2 preseason. So technically, that's part of my storm already. Hurricanes, total hurricanes for the whole season now, because we haven't had any hurricanes for preseason, only tropical storms. It's going to be 8 to 12 hurricanes, and then major hurricanes. I do predict 3 to 6, which is why I said I agree with the NOAA. I think 3 to 6 is decent. I don't see anything higher than 7 in my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and bye guys.